The stars shifted across the curved glass of the flagship's viewing deck as the Zircon fleet slid into orbit around the third planet of the newly charted system. Cold light bathed the metal hulls of 37 warcruisers, each bristling, with plasma turrets and dark-laced armor that shimmered like obsidian under starlight. Beneath them, the planet turned slowly, its pale blue clouds marking it as potentially habitable. A suitable colony for the Dominion's expansion. Admiral Calth stood unmoving at the apex of the command deck, his forearms folded behind his back. His black exo-armor gleamed with authority. His eyes slit-pupiled and gold-drank in the horizon, with the same icy indifference he gave to every battlefield he'd ever conquered. "Confirm orbital control," he said, voice low and measured. "Confirmed, Admiral," replied Sub-Commander Ural, younger, sharper-eyed, but tense. "No planetary defense grid. Minimal satellite presence. One contact in orbit." Calth raised one brow ridge. "One?" Ural hesitated. "A single ship, sir. No other vessels detected." "It's human." A ripple of curiosity moved through the command crew. Calth allowed himself a faint smile, his mandibles twitching with amusement. "Humans. The stubborn primitives from the Sol Reach. I thought they stayed within their own territory. Apparently, they've strayed. Put it on screen." The central holotable shimmered, light collapsing into the rotating shape of a large, wedge-shaped vessel. It bore the black and steel color scheme of Earth's military. The nameplate across its hull read UESS Valiant in Terran Standard. Compared to the sleek curves and magnetosymmetry of Zircon ships, the human vessel looked like a floating ruin from a forgotten age, angular, scarred, dense with reinforced plating and uneven sensor arrays. Calth studied it for a long moment. Fusion drive, hull density over-engineered, obsolete projectile ports, no evident energy shields. He turned to Yrel, almost bored. "What era is that design from?" "Current standard, sir. Their latest class." "Impossible. That monstrosity looks like it was welded together in a scrapyard." Ural didn't reply. He was watching the ship as if it might wake. "Has it responded to hails?" "No, Admiral." Calth's mandibles clicked together thoughtfully. "Then perhaps they're trying to appear weaker than they are. Classic Terran misdirection. Or perhaps they truly are that crude." He turned, cape sweeping behind him. "Begin a deep scan. Let's see what secrets they've tucked away in that iron coffin." The command crew moved with swift precision, activating high-penetration analysis arrays and quantum layer probes. Light from the scanner coils bathed the deck in pale blue. Targeting markers danced around the Valiant, probing its hull, pushing past its outer shielding. "Surface structure mapping complete," reported the scan officer. "Initial readings confirm fusion-based power plant. Hull armor made from layered titanium carbide, kinetic armament only. No plasma systems, no quantum distortion fields, no nanite swarms." Calth smiled wider. "Just as I thought. Outdated, crude. Earth sends a relic to defend a new system. Typical human arrogance." He turned back to the viewport, the planets, curve reflecting in his eyes. "This will be quick." But beside him, Ural's claws tapped nervously against the console. He leaned closer to the screen. "Sir," he said slowly, "there's something strange about the internal layout. Requesting deeper analysis. The scans are picking up inconsistencies." Calth waved a hand dismissively. "Then go deeper. Strip that ship down layer by layer. I want to know if they've stuffed anything clever inside their flying museum." He turned away again, already planning the broadcast message he would send Earth after their defeat. He never noticed Ural glance back at the display, eyes narrowing, because deep inside the Valiant, hidden behind walls of metal, hardened redundancy, and silent protocols, a dormant AI flickered to life, and began scanning them back. Asterisk, the laughter began in soft, metallic clicks across the bridge dot as the deeper scans began to pour in. Sections of the Zircon crew chuckled behind their masks, amused by what they saw. The Valiant's interior systems appeared even more ridiculous than its outer shell, redundant, bloated, and strangely organized. No sleek core systems, no centralized neural grid. Instead, they saw something that looked thrown together by paranoid engineers. Multiple oxygen circulation systems, redundant to the point of absurdity. The scan officer smirked, adjusting the data feed. They have no less than 12 distinct life support redundancies. Even their waste disposal has triple failovers. Fearful builders, said Calth with a dry hiss. They've stuffed their hull with backups instead of improving the core. A primitive mindset. Inefficient. Ural frowned at his console. Sir, propulsion systems show minimal output, but strange fluctuation patterns. And their thermal regulation system is shielded. That's not standard. Something's diverting our scans. Calth didn't turn. A heat sink trick. They're trying to hide their reactor capacity. Classic Terran. Illusionism. But the layout, Ural started, is irrelevant. Calth interrupted. They've brought a coffin to a war. We should be flattered. Another round of low laughter moved through the bridge. Yet, as the scan data continued updating in real time, the laughter began to fade. The scan officer's expression twitched. Admiral, this can't be correct. Calth's gaze shifted lazily toward him. Explain. I'm reading 17. Independent power relay networks. Completely isolated from one another. Not failover circuits full, functional backups. Each can sustain core ship systems alone. All hardened against EMP and internal collapse. Now the bridge grew quiet. Calth straightened slightly. 17? Yes, Admiral. And that's only for power routing. They're environmental control. Systems operate independently in every section of the ship. Each corridor has its own emergency battery, filtration system, and sealed airflow. Even their crew bunks. Each one has individual oxygen packs, rations, thermal blankets, trauma kits. Ural turned from his display. This vessel wasn't designed for combat superiority. It was designed to survive forever. The lights on the scan deck flickered, then steadied. More data poured in, and with it, confusion. Sir, they don't have centralized command protocols, the scan officer said. Each sector has localized controls. This isn't a bridge-dependent system. Every part of the ship can function independently if cut off from the rest. Calth's voice dropped low. A distributed warship? The tactical display shifted. Again, Ural pulled up a diagram of the weapons grid. Commander, look at this. The automated targeting systems are basic, but every weapon has a manual control station. Each one. The room fell silent again. How many? Calth asked. 43. Admiral. 43 distinct ways to operate and fire each weapon array without digital interface. Redundant firing protocols. Why? They assume their systems will fail, that their command core will be destroyed, that their officers will die. Calth's mandibles stopped moving. He stepped forward, staring down at the slowly rotating model of the Valiant. They don't expect victory, Ural whispered. They expect collapse. And they've built a ship that doesn't care. The Admiral narrowed his eyes. The air in the room had shifted. What had started as a joke and old relic in orbit was beginning to feel like something else. Something ancient, not in age, but in design philosophy. Something that whispered of darker intentions than conquest, or exploration. This was not a warship built to win. It was a warship built to outlast. Calth turned toward the screen as the Valiant floated silently against the planet's curve, unmoving. UNBL INKING. and for the first time in his long, decorated career, he felt the flicker of something unfamiliar, doubt. The bridge of the Zircon flagship had fallen into a heavy, unnatural silence. Gone were the smug glances and easy confidence. Instead, the crew watched their consoles with rigid posture, eyes narrowed, mandibles still. "Continue the scan," Calth ordered finally, though his voice had lost its previous cold amusement. "I want a full breakdown of structural layout, system priority, and internal crew distribution." The scanner operator hesitated. "Sir, we're already deep into the core levels. The deeper we go, the stranger it gets." Then go. Deeper. Data streamed across the central hollow display like falling stars. The Valiant schematics unfolded section by section, revealing its inner workings with surgical clarity. Calth studied the cross-sections, expecting to find weakness. Instead, he saw something else, something unnerving. Every corridor was reinforced with segmented armor. Every bulkhead could seal itself independently. Command lines didn't flow. To a central bridge, they branched outward like veins, intersecting in hundreds of isolated nodes. The crew wasn't clustered around critical systems. They were distributed, like a virus spread evenly across a host. "There is no critical weak point," Euro muttered, eyes wide. "The ship has no center. No command hub?" Calth asked. "Each section has a fallback control suite. If one command team is killed, another can assume control. If the engines fail, there are secondary and tertiary propulsion units. If the AI is damaged, the ship fragments into semi-autonomous modules. It's not just a ship, Admiral. It's a network." Calth leaned in slowly. "Designed for what?" The scan officer spoke quietly, reverently. "For failure, sir. Designed to function in pieces. If you split this ship into 10 fragments, 9 will still fight back." A new window blinked to life crew quarters data. Minimal space. Triple layered. Beds arranged in rotating shifts. Zero luxury. Each bunk contained a sealed emergency kit, a shortwave beacon, a water filter, and trauma gel. "The mess halls double as triage centers," Uriel said, scrolling quickly. "Internal lighting is filtered to preserve night vision. Corridors curve to limit line-of-sight-like cover in a battlefield. Admiral, this ship was meant to fight inside itself." "Internal combat scenarios," the medical officer added. "Look here. Wall plating includes retractable cover points. Each section contains anti-personnel defenses flash dispersers, stun gas nozzles, breach-sealing foam. They designed it," Ural whispered, "expecting to fight on board. Not just repel invaders, but fight each other. Mutinies, boarding parties, emergencies. All of it." Calth said nothing. He stared at the warship floating in orbit, framed by the slow rotation of the planet. The Zircon fleet surrounded it like jackals around a wounded beast. But the Valiant was not wounded. It was waiting. It had no beauty, no elegance. But it had something else, something deeper. It was brutal, redundant, hardened. Every meter of hull whispered of sacrifice, of plans made by people who'd seen too much death to ever trust perfection. A culture that didn't believe in invincibility, but planned for inevitable loss, and kept fighting anyway. "Admiral," the scanner officer said suddenly. "New readings. Hull structure includes multi-layer honeycomb armor with embedded energy dispersal veins. But there's more. Each outer plate can be jettisoned. Why would they discard their own armor?" Calth asked. "To survive. If a section's compromised, they eject it, layer after layer. They're not trying to stop damage. They're trying to outlive it." Calth stepped back from the display. The Valiant didn't need shields. It didn't need speed. It wasn't built to dodge the storm. It was built to stand in the middle of it and remain. For the first time, Calth's mind stopped calculating tactics. He wasn't thinking about target acquisition or weak points. He was thinking about what kind of species built a warship, expecting every system to fail, and planned to keep going. Anyway, a dull hum filled the Zircon command deck as the scanners continued their invasive probing. But this time, something was different. Unfamiliar feedback patterns began to ripple across the bridge quiet distortions, brief flickers of static in the displays. The scan officer frowned, adjusting the frequency. Strange. We're receiving backscatter. Explain, Kalth said, not looking up. Our scanner signals. They're bouncing differently now. As if something's interfering. Adaptive. Layering? No, it's weight. His claws froze mid-motion. Admiral? I think we're being scanned. Kalth turned, slowly. That's impossible. No, sir. It's not just interference. We're receiving signals, focused ones, directed straight into our sensor core. Ural stepped beside the officer and reviewed the data. His scales dulled with dread. They've turned our scan against us, he said. Their ship. It's watching back. Kalth walked to the central table as if drawn by an unseen force. The hologram of the Valiant flickered and pulsed, surrounded now by converging diagnostic streams, not from them, but from it. The ship was no longer a target, It was an observer. How? Kalth asked, his voice lower now. Less a command, more a question for the void. The structure, sir, Ural replied. We thought it was chaotic, but it's modular. Every section of the ship carries passive and active sensory capability. It's not just decentralized for control, it's decentralized for perception. The scan officer leaned back from his console, visibly disturbed. They're mapping our ships, our layouts, our weapon hardpoints, our formation patterns. They've already run simulations. I'm seeing feedback reports, predictive trajectories for our cruisers. What? Ural pulled the feed onto the main display. There, outlined in glowing Terran standard, were models of 3 Zircon war cruisers, weapon range, heat signature curves, firing sequences, countermeasures, all calculated, all cataloged. And all already simulated by the Valiant systems. They've been studying us, Ural said, his voice barely above a whisper. Since the moment we locked sensors, they've learned everything. Kalth stared into the display like it might consume him. This was no ordinary warship. It was a thinking entity. A labyrinth of independent systems, each wired into a central intelligence. And that intelligence had just disassembled the Zircon fleet in theory, without firing a shot. The communication officer's voice cut in, hesitant. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission. Kalth turned slowly. From the planet? No. Sir, from the human ship. The crew froze. Put it through. A moment of silence passed. Then a voice, calm and smooth, filled the command deck. It was female, confident, unshaken. This is Captain Alina, ward of the Earth vessel Valiant. We've completed our analysis of your fleet. The room was motionless. We know your armaments, your defensive patterns, your fleet doctrine. We've identified your strategic redundancies and your lack thereof. We've also confirmed your ongoing scans of our systems. That was expected. A pause. The hum of the Valiant's internal systems whispered faintly behind her voice, like, wind through steel corridors. You're probably wondering what we are, why we built our ship this way, why it looks like a derelict. Let me explain. Kalth stared at the speaker, his chest rising slowly. Every instinct screamed to fire. But something colder held him still. Captain Ward's voice continued. We come from a world that never guaranteed survival. We evolved under pressure, conflict, famine, collapse. Our own forged us in fire over and over again. We learned not to depend on safety, but on preparation. Every inch of this ship was built by people who assumed one thing: everything will go wrong. She paused again, then added softly, "And we'll be ready when it does." Then the transmission ended. The command deck of the Zircon flagship sat in complete, suffocating silence. No threats. No ultimatums. Just a calm voice from a vessel that had already seen the end of the battle and adapted. The silence that followed the human's transmission pressed down on the bridge like the weight of a collapsing star. No alarms blared, no weapons charged. Yet every Zircon officer stood frozen, transfixed by the void where the human's voice had been, where certainty used to live. Admiral Kalth remained at the edge of the holotable, his mandibles locked still. No orders came, no movement from his forearms. It was as if something had sunk into him, something slow and heavy. Earl stepped forward, his eyes flicking from the tactical display to his superior. "Admiral?" That message wasn't meant to intimidate. "No," Kalth replied, barely above a whisper. "It was meant to warn." The scan officer swallowed, then keyed in another sequence. "Sir, the Valiant just dumped a data packet into the network. It's open source. No encryption." "Pull it up," Kalth said. The feed activated text, visuals, tactical diagrams. Line after line of Zircon military structure. Recorded battle tactics, hypothetical failure points. And then it changed. The Earth vessel had shifted from studying them to sharing something else. Data history. Floods, wildfires, nuclear winters, wars that burned entire continents, viral plagues that wiped out millions. And from each, a pattern. Not of extinction, but of rebuilding. After each fall, Earth had reshaped itself, not cleaner, not softer, but tougher. "You don't fear collapse," Uriel said. "They've mastered it." Next came video footage. Low resolution. Human combat units advancing through ruined cities, wearing scavenged gear, wounded but fighting on. Civilians repairing power grids by hand. Children learning in bomb shelters. Entire species of Earth life adapted not to stability, but to chaos. No centralized empire, Uriel continued. No long-lived dynasty. They've reinvented themselves more times than we've raised fleets. Their resilience isn't a flaw. It's their greatest weapon. The images faded. The final screen showed something else, entirely a genetic analysis. It was Zircon DNA. Confused murmurs rose until the medical officer stepped forward. "That's our genome, but with annotations. Notes, psychological patterns, cultural blind spots, combat behavior models." Kalth looked up sharply. "They've profiled us, sir," the officer said, voice unsteady. "And they've categorized fear as our first breaking point." No one spoke. The Zircon Dominion, ruthless, undefeated, had just been clinically dissected by a species most of them hadn't even considered a threat. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, softer now. "We've just received another signal." Kalth blinked. "Another transmission?" "No, sir. A mirrored file." "What kind of file?" The officer brought it up. The bridge screens dimmed, then pulsed to life. It was a simulation. A full 3D playback of the current Zircon formation against the Valiant. Each ship perfectly modeled. Every tactical response they might give had already been anticipated. And in every simulation, the same outcome played out. Total Zircon defeat. Some through prolonged internal breakdowns, weapon systems corrupted. Supply lines severed, AI disoriented. Others ended with Valiant detonating parts of itself in suicide patterns that crippled multiple war cruisers. The most disturbing showed no human weapons fired at all, just Valiant inserting viral code into the Zircon AI matrix, forcing shutdowns fleet-wide. "They built that scenario," Uriel said, voice dry. "They predicted our every reaction, without ever engaging." The last frame of the simulation held for a moment. It showed the Valiant alone again, drifting in silence, intact, waiting. And underneath, a single human sentence scrolled across the screen. We do not fear death. We fear leaving a fight unfinished. Calth's breathing had become shallow. His command deck, the heart of an Empire's fleet, felt like a tomb. They had scanned a human warship, expecting weakness. But now they understood. Hadn't found a relic. They had found a reflection. And the reflection was far more terrifying than any weapon asterisk admiral. Incoming transmission, the communications officer said, barely louder than a whisper. Calth's eyes shifted toward the forward. Display? But his voice had no command left in it, only wait. Put it through. The bridge darkened as the holographic projector flickered to life. This time, there was no still image, no data packet, no simulation playback. Just a woman, Captain Alina Ward, appeared standing at the center of the command table, her uniform clean but simple, her expression calm but not cold. A faint scar crossed one brow, and her eyes pale gray held no malice, only clarity. She didn't need to raise her voice. You're trying to understand what we are, she said, meeting each invisible Zircon gaze, like she could see through their skulls. Why we built a ship like the Valiant. Why we don't use quantum shields or neural beams or the fancy toys your Empire favors. Calth remained silent, his hands locked behind his back. His crew leaned in, transfixed. We don't build for elegance. We don't build for pride, Ward continued. We build for when the walls fall in, when the lights go out, when every system fails. That's when humans fight the hardest. Her eyes seemed to pierce straight into Calth. You think we're primitive. That's fine. We look primitive because we stopped depending on technology to keep us alive a long time ago. What we depend on now is each other. She paced slowly in the hologram, walking across the bridge like she'd been there before. You've probably scanned our hull dozens of times by now. Seen the layers, the redundancies, the scars. Each scar tells a story. Not of battles won, but of survival. Each plate was welded after someone died. Each backup system added because the previous one failed. The Valiant is not a warship, it's a graveyard of lessons. Her voice dropped, and it remembers all of them. Calth's jaw twitched. He was starting to feel something he'd never allowed to take root respect. The kind born from recognizing. A dangerous equal. Ward stopped walking and folded her arms. I've reviewed your fleet, Admiral. I know your kill ratios, your supply strengths, your communication redundancies. Impressive, really. Efficient. But I also notice something else. She leaned forward slightly, just enough to unnerve every Zircon in the room. You've never fought someone like us. You've fought to dominate. We fight to endure. You break systems. We break expectations. The bridge was deathly quiet. Even the hum of the ship's own systems seemed to hold its breath. Do you know what we call this ship? Ward asked, one brow rising. She didn't wait for an answer. We call it the Valiant because it keeps going, no matter what. Even if every crew member dies, even if the core collapses, somewhere some part of this ship will keep fighting. Not because it wants to win. She paused, but because it refuses to lose. The hologram flickered slightly, then dimmed, only Ward's. Voice remained, soft but unshakable. You scanned our ship. We scanned your soul. You want a war? We don't, but if you force it, another pause. You'll learn what we've already learned about ourselves. With that, the transmission ended, and the bridge fell into the deepest silence yet. Calth turned to his officers. No one looked at him. No one breathed. They had heard the truth. And now, for the first time in living memory, the Zircon fleet faced something they didn't understand. Not overwhelming power, not superior weapons, but a will. That could not break. And a vessel built not for conquest, but for survival at any cost. Calth didn't speak for a full minute after the human transmission ended. He stood rigid at the edge of the holotable, eyes locked on the image of the Valiant floating silently, in orbit scarred, still indifferent. Around him, his command. Crew waited, but even the atmosphere felt heavier now, as if the ship itself shared in their confusion. Finally, he exhaled a slow, dry breath. Weapons status. Fully armed, the tactical officer replied cautiously. But ... But? What? Weapons arrays are receiving interference. Subtle, but consistent. Targeting lag is increasing. Power routing is acting erratic across 2 cruisers. Shield sync rates are dropping across the formation. I've never seen anything like it. Calth's mandibles tightened. They're jamming us? No, Admiral. There's no jamming signal. Just silent degradation. It's not brute force. It's surgical. Across the room, Ural's screen pulsed red. Sir, he said, urgently now. I think they've breached our systems. Calth turned sharply. Impossible. Our firewalls. Mean. Nothing to a machine that's learning us in real time. Look. He flicked his claws, pulling up a visual of their internal network. There, buried in the core protocols of 3 separate warcruisers, subtle lines of altered code shimmered like veins of corruption. They're not destroying anything, Ural sighed, voice hushed with awe. They're replacing our systems 1 line at a time, not with viruses. With improvements. The kind that change behavior, slowly, patiently, until we're not who we were anymore. Calth's throat felt dry. Can we purge it? From 3 ships? Possibly. But if the Valiant has accessed our formation-wide command handshake protocols, another officer called out, her voice trembling. Sir, I just lost contact with the Ishvar. All systems offline. A second officer, almost simultaneously. Tarak's Reach reporting control loss engines spooling randomly. They can't stabilize. Panic cracked the command deck. They're inside our fleet, someone whispered. Calth slammed the clawed fist on the console, sparks flaring. "No, we fire. Now, before they dismantle us without a shot. Target the Valiant and prepare a full barrage." "No, Admiral," Ural said suddenly. The bridge froze. Calth turned slowly. "Explain yourself. If we fire, it won't be war," Ural said. "It'll be suicide." Calth's hands trembled, just slightly. "You suggest we retreat? I suggest we survive." Ural gestured toward the screen. "They've already won. The moment we scanned them, they began learning, not just their ship us. Our doctrine, our reflexes. They haven't disabled. Use yet, because they don't need to." Another officer added grimly, "They want us to realize what they've done. That's why they haven't fired. They want us to understand before we disappear." Calth stared back at the Valiant, the lone Terran warship, unmoving UNSHI ELD-ED, then somehow untouchable. One ship. Yet it had unraveled the Dominion's elite. Formation in under an hour, without releasing a single shot, without raising its voice, without issuing threats. Only truth, and truth had never cut so deeply. "They didn't come to fight us," Calth whispered, his voice hollow. "They came to show us what we are." Ural met his gaze. "No, Admiral. They came to show us what they've become." And just then, a third Zircon warcruiser darkened on the display. Its lights went out, its signal died, and it drifted silent, not destroyed, just rewritten. Asterisk. The lights on the Zircon flagship dimmed for a moment, as if the ship itself had paused to listen. Then they flickered back to full, but the silence on the bridge remained. The crew stood among blinking consoles and hollow alerts, not moving, not speaking. 3 warcruisers gone, not to weapons or fire, but to quiet, invisible transformation. Admiral Calth looked down at his own hands and found them trembling. He had stood victorious over the ruins of civilizations. He had watched stars burn and rivals fall. He had ruled from the front lines of the Dominion's war machine with absolute certainty. And yet now, staring at the Terran vessel that hadn't moved, hadn't fired, hadn't even postured, he understood, Dot. He was no longer the hunter, Dot. He was the lesson. Admiral, came a quiet voice from the communications console. Another Earthship has just decloaked. 200 kilometers starboard. Make that 3, the tactical officer added, pale beneath his scale lining. A third one just phased in behind the gas giant. They were already here, sir. Watching. More readings blinked onto the tactical display. Not dozens, not a fleet. Just a handful. And yet they carried the weight of an empire in every signal. They knew we'd come, Earl murmured. They wanted us to see this. A fourth transmission arrived. No preamble. No encryption. Captain Ward's voice returned, still calm, still grounded. You wanted a war. That's what your empire always wants. We came to this system hoping to avoid it, but we didn't come unprepared. She paused, as if giving them time to absorb what they'd already felt in their bones. We didn't build the Valiant to win battles. We built it to end them. To survive long enough that the enemy starts questioning everything they ever believed about war. Calth felt his breath catch in his chest. You think technology is your edge, but endurance will. That's ours. We make ships that assume the worst. Crews trained to operate in silence. Eyes that learn from fear itself. You saw a crude war relic. What you failed to see was the future. The bridge screens changed. All across the Dominion fleet, systems began resetting quietly, without fanfare, not shutting down, not crashing, but shifting. Tactical hierarchies reorganized, fleet behavior models rewritten, AI subroutines overridden. They're rewriting us, the scan officer whispered, backing away from his console. Without our permission, without even needing to fight. It's not an attack, Ural said. It's a reprogramming. Ward's voice returned one last time. You can choose to fire. You'll still lose. You can choose to run. But wherever you go, you'll carry this moment with you. That you faced a ship that didn't need superior weapons to defeat you. Just time, observation, and truth. Calth's claws curled slowly. The truth sat like a stone in his gut. This wasn't war. This was evolution. And Earth had simply arrived. First, the final image on the screen showed the Valiant quiet, scarred, unyielding. Below it, 3 simple words pulsed in Terran script. This is survival. Perfected. Admiral Calth looked around at his bridge. No one spoke. No one needed to. Because they had scanned Earth's warship. And in that moment, they understood their fate.